Hello everyone and welcome to the channel for this game recap and review of the SEC Championship, and this is also where I eat some seared crow. If this is your first time visiting the channel and you want to hear a different take of college football from an analytical perspective, do yourself a favor and hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you'll stay updated on another video. Also hit the like button, it does help the channel grow, and give me what your biggest takeaway of the game was. Now, I'm going to begin with this. I was wrong. I was way wrong. I was really wrong. I've been doing this channel for about 3 years now, and I've done a lot of Alabama games. You can also go back and check the receipts on every single one of them, and I've never picked against them until this past week. Alabama was not healthy going into this game at running back. The offensive line was in flux after a porous showing against Auburn last week, and everything was set up as if it was going to go Georgia's way. But I felt Alabama was not going to get blown out. Unlike some sports writers like Pat Forty and Andy Staples, who said Alabama was going to get buried, I predicted a 24-17 score, and what we ended up getting was the remake of the 2003 Big 12 championship game, where similar Oklahoma came into the game hailed as the greatest team ever against a Kansas State team where everybody didn't give a chance to beat them. Oklahoma was number one in total offense, number one in total defense. They scored first in that game, and then Kansas State ran off 35 unanswered, winning by the score of 35-7, and Darren Sproles was just running all over the place. It was a game where everyone was certain Oklahoma could not lose. That season, Oklahoma was destroying everybody, except for Alabama that season. Alabama finished 4-9. They only beat them by 7. It was Mike Shula's first year. But Oklahoma they were beating teams 65-13, 52-9, 77-0, and everyone left that Kansas State game in complete shock after what they just saw. So what happened in this game? Well, Georgia jumped out to an early 10-0 lead, and it had that feeling that it might get bad for Alabama, because Alabama, they weren't clicking on offense, and Georgia started to get rhythm against the Alabama defense. And then the second quarter happened, and Bryce Young found Jamison Williams on a 3rd and 2 on a busted coverage by the Georgia secondary. But in that run, you saw the difference in speed they had over Georgia's secondary. And when you saw Jamison Williams catch that ball in the middle of the open field, you didn't think he was going to be caught. And you also asked, if you were an Alabama fan, can we continue to keep doing that on their defense? Then Alabama went up 14-10 after Bryce Young had a Heisman-like drive, starting with a 1st and 20 on their 10-yard line. He hits John Mechie on a 40-yard pass where he lined up in a slot against a safety. And then later on in the drive, Bryce Young became the magician when he evaded the rush, then had a lateral to Brian Robinson for a 13-yard play. And by the way, that play was dangerous because Nakobe Dean was right there to make a play. And had he made a play, that ball was going the other way for an interception, and nobody was going to catch him. And then Bryce Young finishes a drive on a 13-yard pass to John Mechie to the corner of the end zone in tight coverage. That drive reminded me of that Rocky and Drago fight in Rocky IV, where Drago's in command of the fight and Rocky's in the corner swinging away, and then he connects on a punch and Drago gets cut. Drago was never in that situation before, and he starts backing up, and then Rocky just kept coming after him. And that's what Alabama did. Alabama kept coming right after Georgia. They went after their corners and safeties. Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning, Will Muschamp, and that defensive staff, they couldn't figure them out. Once the front couldn't stay disciplined in their rush lanes, Bryce Young took off and started running. And Alabama fans were saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. We know you can throw, but if it's not there, use your legs. Get what you can get and just get down. And while we're on the subject of Bryce Young, this should all but wrap up the Heisman for him. I know there are some sports writers who cover the sport And I get they have Alabama fatigue, but there should not be any mental gymnastics done to find a way to give the Heisman to anyone else. The Heisman Trophy is staying in Tuscaloosa, and there is nothing you can do about it. You can get upset, but don't be mad at Alabama. Be mad at Georgia's defense for not being able to cover Alabama's wide receivers. Be mad at the Georgia front for not getting a pass rush against Alabama's offensive line. And speaking of the offensive line, that was my biggest takeaway. Alabama's offensive line could not block a depleted LSU team, and they could not figure out Auburn's pass rush. Yet they stonewalled the best defense in the country on every Bryce Young drop back. It was a virtuoso performance by that offensive line and pass protection. We're not talking about how they did in the running game because they're depleted at that spot. And I'm sure Brian Robinson will be healthy by the time the playoffs start. But the offensive line, who was ranked 78th in offensive sack rate, went up against the 6th best defense in sack rate, and Bryce Young did not get touched. If you were to tell me after the Auburn game that the Alabama offensive line will not allow a sack against that Georgia defense, I would have had you committed to a mental institution because I did not see it happening. Giving up 2 sacks? Maybe. But 0 sacks? Somebody had to have sacrificed a live chicken, or someone offered Joe Boo their cigar and rum, because I didn't see it happening. So what does this mean for Georgia? Obviously, they're in the playoff. I have them projected at 3. I think they'll draw Michigan, and that should be a really good game. I know there are a lot of Stetson Bennett detractors after this game, and I get it. He had the interception in plus territory, and he had the pick 6, but he threw for 340 yards, and he had 7 yards per attempt. That was average. Last year, he completed 45% of his passes against Alabama. This year, it was about 60. Most of that was going to Brock Bowers, who is an absolute stud at tight end, man. He is a beast. Whew, that kid is going to be special. You got 2 more years of him, Georgia fans. So, yeah, definitely count your blessings for sure. So not all of it is lost. But the Georgia running game was held to 3.6 yards per carry. That is 68% of their standard rush average. So that's not typical Georgia football. Most of that was because of Alabama's run defense, which is an elite unit. They reminded us all that they can stop the run. For Alabama, as long as Nick Saban is their head coach and they have a Heisman contender at quarterback, never doubt them, because you will look foolish. Unfortunately, this win came with a cost. Alabama lost John Mechie for the remainder of the season with a torn ACL. Is it a big loss? You lose an experienced wide receiver, but it's time for those young cats to step up in the playoff. And the last thing that I will say before I sign off, I will never, ever, 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 ever doubt Nick Saban for as long as I live. And that is all I got for this game. And as I said before, please give me your biggest takeaway of the game. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.